First, thanks. A great turnout here in person. We have quite a few folks online as well for the final session of our Academy of Scholars program this year. We're really excited about this one. What I said is the sort of special feature version of it, and that we have something that I think is really important to us as researchers, as a college, which is partnerships. And how do we do research with communities in ways that are responsible and responsive to the members of that community? And so this is, I think, the best example we could possibly bring together, which is a partnership between our faculty here at Nance College. We'll talk a little bit more about their roles, and then some folks that we work with quite closely in Belize. And so we have a delegation of scholars from the student ranks, from the faculty ranks, from the administrative ranks, from the university, from different institutions across Belize with us today. We're going to serve as our panelists, and we'll spend the majority of our time today here interacting as a panel. And so I won't introduce each person individually, but I will say that our delegation, who represent the University of Belize, Galen University, and Tamulkan Center for Learning, all kind of bring with them expertise. They bring with them valuable knowledges about indigeneity, about land, about sustainability, about a number of things that we will learn a lot about today. But the thing I'm most proud of is I think that as this partnership has formed over the years with Aisha Lama and the research team, they've done it in, I think, culturally responsible and responsive ways that really took a roadmap for a lot of us as we move forward to these types of research projects. So I'm Josh Newman, an Associate Dean for Research. As I said, this is our last Academy of Scholars event. And I don't want to take any more time. I'll turn it over to our organizers, let them introduce the group. But I do think this is a special one. I hope we get a lot out of it. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Josh. And welcome, everybody. How are we doing?
Well, sir.
Good. Happy Friday. This is one of our dreams coming true, as Aisha earlier described it today. And we are thrilled to be able to share this moment with you all to celebrate this coming together and this developing and evolving friendship, partnership, and collaboration. And so I'll start by first, before I introduce myself, I want to say that this is part of the Academies of Scholar events. And if people have not yet had a chance to explore the Academies of Scholar, we really, really invite you, encourage you, and really urge you to explore the different resources under the leadership of the Office of Research with Josh Newman and the wonderful Juhi too. So please do explore the resources and do consider applying if you are in a place in your career where you can apply. It's been our pleasure, Aisha and I, to be part of this Academy of Scholars this year. A fantastic experience that makes things like this possible. So with that, I want to welcome you to today's event. My name is Lama Jabir. I am a faculty in the School of Teacher Education. And along with my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Aisha Khurshid from Educational Policies and Leadership, Education Leadership and Policy Studies, ELPS.
We have too many departments.
I said to myself, I'm not saying education policy, but we've been talking about policy a lot. It's our pleasure to welcome you and into today's dialogue on what impactful research might mean and look like in different communities and institutional contexts. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know today is a very busy day, like many days at FSU, but today is particularly busy. There are many, many events happening. It's an incredibly busy time of the semester too, so we really appreciate you making the time to join us today and to join this conversation. And we also would really start with a deep, warm, and genuine welcome to our esteemed guests from Belize. It is to us an honor and a privilege to be able to welcome you here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to be with us and to share your insights, your wisdom, and your perspectives on what we're going to talk today about. We really look forward to engaging in a conversation together. And we sincerely believe that the experiences and perspectives that you bring today are critical in helping us engage in important and consequential questions about the nature and value of research in the contemporary world. So our speakers today include, and not a specific order per se, but I'll start by introducing you briefly to Mr. Filiberto Rash, principal of the Tumulkin Center of Learning, which is an indigenous Maya boarding school serving indigenous communities in the Toledo district in the southernmost part of Belize. Welcome. Dr. Charlene Enriquez Savory, who is the Vice President of University of Belize, Dr. Aline Harrison, the Dean of Education at Galen University, Ms. Dominga Kuku, student of Criminal Justice and Criminology at the University of Belize, Ms. Huzaira Cho, student of Biology and Chemistry at the University of Belize, Ms. Abigail Sarmiento, student of Anthropology at Galen University, and last but not least, Mr. Delmer Zip, faculty at the University of Belize and director of the Intercultural Indigenous Language Institute. Welcome to you all. Thank you again. The discussant for today's event is the famous and amazing Dr. Josh Newton, Associate Dean of Research of our dear Ann's College of Education at Educational Sciences. Today's discussion is shaped by our intention to foster a relational dialogue among actors with diverse institutional experiences, backgrounds, and perspectives on the nature, value, and goals of impactful research. So whereas educational researchers, practitioners, and administrators often share a common goal of using research to support the well-being, the learning, the growth of teachers, of educators, of families, and of communities, the ways in which the perspectives around what that looks like in practice, the precise outcomes, processes, designs of the research can diverge. And for us, we recognize the tension and the challenges of such divergence. But we also view it and see it as a generative opportunity, actually, as a generative space for dialogue, where we could come together to learn, to deepen our understanding, and to learn with and from one another. And it is these understandings and these commitments towards collective learning that bring us together today and that really shape the nature, the design, and the structure of today's event. So with that intentionality in mind, I want to draw attention to this notion of relational dialogue. So what does that mean? What does that look like for us? We think of and see relational dialogue as really the grounding premise of our approach to research and to research partnerships and collaboration, and to the very nature of the process of knowledge construction. And for us, we approach relationality not merely as about relationship building between researchers and participants and diverse stakeholders, though that is a critical and important part of relational research, but we also see relationality and relational research as a way to imagine and to facilitate dialogue that can allow us to bring different forms of knowledges and ways of knowing into dialogue with one another in relational and not hierarchical ways, in ways that also take into account in respectful and responsible ways the nature of the context within which research is happening and the nature of the communities and the cultures that we are working with. And so with these kinds of orientation, I'm going to invite my dear colleague, Dr. Aisha Khurshid, to share a little bit about how relational research and relationality has shaped the work we've done so far with indigenous communities in Chiapas, Mexico, and now Belize. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and another warm welcome to our guests from Belize. And we know it's such a busy time of the year, so thanks to all of you for joining us today. So this relational dialogue that we are trying to establish here is really grounded in our own research journey, because we saw the value and significance of it through our research. And this research journey started, as many of you know, I would have told you 10 times, it started in 2021 with our community partnership in Chiapas, Mexico. And we worked with an indigenous Maya Muslim community. And at that time, our team grew, and it's an amazing research team from FSU and also from Chiapas and Belize. But at that time, it was me and Melba Marin Velasquez, our wonderful friend and colleague. We started this journey, and we were very aware of our status as not indigenous scholars working with an indigenous community. So we intentionally created spaces, moments, and structures where we could slow down research and really engage with the community and different community members. So that we believe that design really facilitated within 2 years the community identified an area for partnership with us, which was the preservation and transfer of Maya medicinal knowledge. What happened next was that there was this year-long workshops, almost year-long, 10 months, different phases of workshops in which biomedicinal knowledge was learned and taught by indigenous women to each other and then to the community. And what we saw in those spaces was that this indigenous Maya medicinal educational model brought together this Maya ancestor knowledge with what might be considered as Western academic knowledge in terms of assessment, evaluation, and other aspects. But it was done in a way that seemed very relational, where one knowledge system was not erasing the other, or it was not arranged in a hierarchical way. And then the community had a very positive response to it. And the women especially who participated in it and then became teachers, for them, they shared that it was a transformative experience. So that became a focus for us, that's something that we are interested in doing now, that if and how that could be done in schools, in more mainstream formal schools. And that's something that we are focusing on in our work. In Belize too, we are exploring at this point. And then moving on to our current research partnerships in Belize, out of the 5 people who are here, there are co-researchers, youth researchers, and community researchers, and faculty, and K-12 education leaders, researchers. We are very fortunate and honored to have the opportunity to work with them. As part of this partnership, we have been working with them for over a year now. And as part of it, 3 of the people who are here, Huzera, Dominga, and Abby, and 2 other youth researchers who were not able to join us, they conducted research in their own Maya communities to look at the community-centered knowledge systems, as well as the connections and disconnections between their community knowledges and the school knowledges. And another aspect that we looked at was the sense of belonging for indigenous students in our undergrad institutions. So today's event is part of this week-long symposium that is focusing on indigenous education in Belize. Different events were held as part of it, but our focus was on developing relationality. Because usually researchers are going into communities or into other education institutions, and that relationality is usually unilateral. But we want to have that dialogic where we know of each other in our different contexts and dimensions. And then I would like to introduce our FSU research team. Dr. Melba Marin Velasquez, who's working with the Learning Systems Institute. Dr. Ana Elise de la Cruz Benito, who just finished her PhD in math education. Hi, Ana Elise. There are a lot of people on Zoom too, so she's wonderful, and she's here in more than one ways. Jessica Quinn, who is there. She's a graduate student. She just had a baby, so bravo to you. This is her first time coming back to Stone after having a baby, so hope it doesn't feel too weird. And our amazing Catherine John, 84 hours, we have both ACLIC, and Dr. Ominia Melinder, who is Associate Dean of the School of Nursing. So this amazing team, it's been an honor to work with them. And we would like to share our deep gratitude to a number of people who made this research possible, starting from 2021 to now, this symposium. Dr. Josh Newman, who is Associate Dean of Research, who has been in our progress since 2021. Dean Damon Andrew, Dr. Andrew Frank, who's Director of the Native American Indigenous Studies Center. Dr. Stacy Rutledge, Chair of the ELPS program, Dr. Amy Thompson, Director of the School of Future Education. And we have been very fortunate to receive so much support from FSU. We got the SEED grant and Scholar Dean Circle and Academy of Scholars and Community Engaged Partnership Award to support this research. So thank you so much for all your support. So today's session, the main question is that the prompt that our wonderful speakers received was, what is impactful research and how do you know its value and relevance in your specific institutional and or community context? This is a very deep conversation, very critical questions, and we need so much more time for that. But unfortunately, given the linear construction of time, we only have 5 minutes for each speaker. So thank you so much for your willingness to do that. And our dear friend Bhushan is the timekeeper. He's a very strict timekeeper. So when 4 minutes are done and when there's 1 more minute to go. So thank you so much. And I'm going to invite our first speaker, Mr. Filberto Breach.
Like I was sharing, the Shawinigan Center of Learning is an indigenous-centered educational institution that is serving in Maya youths in the Toledo, primarily the Toledo district. And one of our main focus is for us to empower these Maya youths to be able to accept their Maya heritage and conscious fact that they also need an education. And in other words, we need to maintain a sustainable development to live in peace and harmony with Mother Nature. So that is the concept of what we're doing there at the institution. Now, when it comes to impactful research, our first question always, and this is based on experiences, who will it impact? How it will benefit these communities? That is the first thing. We are mindful that a lot of research comes, and the first thing is that information can be extracted for good or for the benefit of the community. And I know that research is often measured by the publications, citations from the researchers. It is very good at some point, but we also need to be able to know that we will have to value the communities where we're going to get this information, or how it will benefit them as well. It is about creating a balance where we can gather this information, but also remember that we need to ensure that it is going to benefit the communities. Also, it is about research can be meaningful in a way that it will strengthen, for me, when I talk about impact, it's about strengthening the Maya communities, the Maya way of living, and also supports the cultural continuity. These are things that we're very, very mindful of. We highly encourage that this is something that you would continue to do. Our students and teachers have been working in close relation with our Maya communities throughout our years of existence in the Toledo district for the 22nd year now. We have been working closely with our Maya communities. In this is that one of the things is that cultural preservation is very important, but we have been able to do that. A lot of community engagement where we have established events for our communities. It's not just about educating our students, but it's also about bringing the communities together to feel honored, to feel that respect that we still can maintain our culture. And because of this, we have to ensure that traditional knowledges as well needs to be inserted into our education system as well. So it's about creating balance with our partners. It's about participation from our communities and also our collaborators. That is very important. And I would like to continue by, we need to ensure that we recognize the value from each communities. And we need to ensure that we can give back to the community at some point. So I believe that those are some of the things that we can do. And at Tolkien, we encourage our students to see research as a way of community engagement. would love that we continue this collaboration, partnership, so that we can get back to our communities and eventually we live in peace and harmony, continue to live in peace and harmony with Mother Nature. That is our ultimate goal. So I believe that with this research, it's going to be impactful. Ultimately, I would like to end by, we need to continue building bridges in our collaboration, both academic and indigenous wisdom for the people, to strengthen the culture, to support the well-being of communities. And I believe that is what truly means to be an impactful research. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rash. Now we'd like to invite Dr. Charlene if you could leave. To address us.
Your father.
Listen, good afternoon, everyone.
Right to this old like
It is with great privilege and honor for the invitation today to meet with colleagues from FSU and from my fellow partners from Belize, and to be invited to such conversation that sits at the very heart of what universities are for. When I was reflecting on the question that was posed of what impactful research means, I had to look or think deep, not only from the institutional perspective and not only from the community context, but also regionally, because I sit as the president of CANCE, Caribbean Area Network for Quality Assurance in Tertiary Education, for higher education. And I came up with 3 broad areas for reflection. First, from the institutional lens, at the University of Belize, we are the national university of a country of just over 400,000 people. We do not have the scale, the endowment, or the research infrastructure that larger institutions have. So what we do have is proximity to our communities that we serve, to the policymakers who need the evidence, and to problems that will not wait for someone else to study. So at UB, impactful research is research, in my term, that closes the loop. It begins with a question that matters locally. It engages students and faculty as co-investigators, and it returns its findings to people and institutions who can act on them. So currently at UB, we are moving through our accreditation process from SAC-COC. And we are learning to articulate this more rigorously to show that research quality and research relevance are not in tension, but are 2 sides of the same commitment to institutional effectiveness. And so when I go now to the regional lens, as president of Caribbean Area Network for Quality Assurance in Tertiary Ed, I have the privilege of seeing across borders. And what I see in the Caribbean cannot afford import or cannot afford to import its research agenda wholesale. Framework designed for large, well-resourced systems often miss the texture of small state institutions or realities. Our vulnerability to climate change, our mitigation patterns, our linguistic and cultural diversity, our fiscal constraint. Impactful research in our region is research that takes those realities seriously, that builds local capacity rather than extracting local data, and that respects the principle that the people closest to the problem usually hold part of the solution. So quality assurance is this, in this sense, is not just about standard on paper. It is about asking whether our research system are producing knowledge that our society can actually use. So I gave you my institutional perspective, I gave you the regional perspective, I know I go local.
You see?
To the community and the partner lens. This is where I want to push gently on how we assess value. As a researcher myself, I know that, and I push my faculty on this, citation count and journal rankings have their place, but there are actually poor proxies for impact in context in which I work in. I would rather ask, did policy change because of this work? Did the community gain a tool or a skill or a voice where local partners shaping the research question, or were local partners shaping the research question from the beginning, or were they consulted at the end? Was the knowledge returned to them in a form that they can actually use? These are harder things to measure, and I know, but they are the right thing to measure. And partnership like this one between FSU and our institution in Belize matter precisely because they create that space for that kind of mutual and accountability long-term or long horizon work. So when I think about relevance of impactful research, I think about it as a discipline of humility and a practice of accountability. Because the most important question usually comes from outside, and accountability because the value of our work is ultimately judged not by us, but by the community and institution we all claim to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we'd like to invite Dr. Reason.
Right.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning to all those out there in the virtual. My name is Eileen Harrison, and I'm representing Galen University, a small private university in Belize, approximately 900 students, and we offer courses online and in face-to-face environment. At Galen, we think of research not just producing academic papers, creating academic knowledge, but we look at it as part of helping to shape Belize's futures through that knowledge that will directly impact national challenges and opportunities. So impactful research should address real-world challenges, such as literacy gaps, for example, or inequities in access, teacher preparedness. It should inform not just at the institutional level, but at the national level as well. It should enhance human development initiatives and outcomes, aligning it with human development and capability approach. It should most of all, empower the communities, ensuring that the research is not extractive, but participatory and transformative. So we look at it, national relevance, that we can address, we can help to inform government policy and community initiatives, ensuring that whatever decisions are taken are evidence-based. Next, there should be community engagement. Projects that involve local communities, not just as subjects, but as partners, as co-creating knowledge. So the research outcomes in that we are going to be accessible and useful to everyday Belizeans, from farmers to entrepreneurs, from the most rural areas in Belize to populated urban areas that are underserved in many instances. It should position Galen as a hub for research, for not just in Belize, but the Caribbean and Central America. We are situated, strategically situated, Caribbean and Central America. We should be able to, in terms of regional leadership, share the findings that contribute to regional solutions on issues such as climate change, migration, and biodiversity. It should empower students, embedding research into undergraduate and graduate programs so that students learn by doing. And all our courses have a research component embedding. From anthropology, education, all those courses have a research component. It should create pathways for students to publish, to present at symposiums such as this one, to apply their work in real-world context. So not just publish a paper and have it sit on the shelf, catch dust, but be able to make changes in real-world situations. Innovation and sustainability. Research should spark new industries. Ecotourism models, where ecotourism is a big topic in Belize. Green technologies, digital entrepreneurship. We see a lot more of that after COVID. We see a lot more. At least we can see that in Belize. Long-term projects that will help Belize balance economic growth with environmental stewardship. I think that is key for us at Galen. So the big picture, impactful research at Galen would need knowledge in action. Scholarship that doesn't sit on a shelf, but that actively transforms classrooms, community, and national policy. It should elevate Galen from just being a university to being a driver of Belize's development and a voice in global conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we'd like to invite Mr. Dan Rexit.
Good morning. Mostly I thought I was going to go last.
Right, chase the gate.
Oh, it did. Very good, very good. I did not prepare words, but I want to speak from the heart through three stories. I am of Yucatec Maya descent. I come from a small community called San Antonio with a Yucatec Maya name called Relational. The first story I want to tell you is my son. I have a 4-year-old who, by the way, would be running all over this place if he's here. But every night My wife is Yucatec Maya, and I challenged her to teach him Yucatec Maya. I don't speak it unfortunately, but she's Catholic as well, and she taught him a song, and I only know the chorus of the song, which is Kima Kiwo Cristo tu nohe. Can you all repeat that? Kima Kiwo Cristo tu nohe. I am happy Jesus has saved me. That's what really it translates to. And with that, what I want to say is that research has to be about the future. It has to be about the next generation. Will my son be benefited by this or through this? Will this matter to him? And will this teach him how to live well in his society, knowing very well that his identity matters to that particular future? So I know I only have 5 minutes, so I can't develop with much of that thought. But I don't want to share that and leave that there. It has to be intergenerational if we are thinking about impactful research. The second story that I want to share is of a chaya tree. Chaya is a traditional food that we eat in our Maya communities. I grew up having chaya all over the place in your backyard. You just step out and you have a chaya tree. Now, it is sort of our spinach, right? It's a source of food. But chaya trees, I would go near them and it would pinch you. It has like tiny white prickles that if you just push your hand in there, it will pinch you, right? And I grew up being pinched all the time, to be honest, right? But one day I went out with an elder, and the elders stopped and said, "No, before we touch this tree, we have to ask in permission. And once that tree gives you the permission, it will not sting." Right? So he would come and say, "Miss Chaya tree, can you please grant me some of your leaves for my nourishment and for my healing? Because it's also for healing." And with that, I introduced the second concept that to me is very important. That sometimes we are so hungry for the data. We're so hungry for the leaves. Because it's beneficial. It can be very beneficial. But respect is very important. Asking that respect in the context of the community. Because perhaps if I go right now, I step outside and I ask permission for a tree, you would be thinking that I'm crazy to ask for a tree. But within that context, it makes perfect sense. So understanding the concept, the context, and understanding the principle of respect throughout the process of getting to the tree, extracting whatever needs to be extracted and producing something is something that is important. In addition to that, particularly we consume that leaf in specific times of the year because the tradition aligns with it, right? You have specific days when you're not supposed to be eating meat and so forth. So you see there's a nourishment that comes from it, but if we're not careful enough, that will be exploitative as well. The last story that I want to share, I hope I'm not doing too bad with my time, but the last story that I want to share is not my story, but it's something that related deeply with me. Because I have a friend who goes fishing, and they're trying to sort of safeguard traditional fishing. And he said, "Look, today we have the fishing lines, the modern fishing lines, you have the modern nets. You just go in, you extract whatever you need to extract, and you go out." And what he was saying was, well, there's a lot of economic benefit to it. We plan the fishing trips, we go out, we get the fish, we get out. But he was saying that the traditional practices that are being lost there are more than just the practices. Because when you throw the fishing line, and that traditional fishing line takes, let's say, a couple hours for it to make, to catch something, that particular time, the elder and the community members that are there are sharing knowledge. There are values that are being shared in that process. In addition to that, what is very important in that particular arrangement is that the young person, whoever is there, is observing the clouds, observing the sea, observing which areas he is at, and he or she would be able to locate themselves at sea. So what I am trying to say here, is that what is described as slowing down, what is described as sort of taking your time, is perhaps the heart of that research. And if you ignore that heart, then you may get in, extract, get out, and then what stays for the future of that interrogation? What stays there? I think that's a very important element to note, that what we need to understand is that relationality, what I call accompaniment in many ways, is something that is crucial, because we are talking, and just to wrap things up, we are talking about my son and the sons and daughters of many in our communities. We are talking about respect in their communities, and we are talking about them being able to cope and understand that they do not just exist for existing's sake, but they exist in relation to the land, they exist in relation to the sea, to the skies, to the environment that is around them, and to the elders that are around them. And I would like to leave you with this last message, which is, I know I've taken over my time, but which is, sometimes in this technological age, we're so worried about getting to the point that we wanted to get at, that we forget that building those relationships are very important for our future. And that's what we're aiming to do at the University of Belize.
That's a full answer. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm just you too.
Okay, that's a very good way to end it.
Definitely did not plan it.
Thank you so much for the insights that right now we'd like to invite Ms. Dominga. It's a sweet.
Sweet.
Good morning, good afternoon, good morning, Belize time, good time. Well, like Delmer, I didn't prepare any notes. I said I'll just speak from the heart, speak from the mind. I can't compare to what they have. But what I can share is them coming from a perspective of being new to research and being from the local context, like Miss VP was sharing. I would want to start now by, I've been listening to all of these conversations, and I'm questioning myself and saying, what does it mean, to have an impactful research? What does that mean for me, being from the community, knowing that I will be a part of the subject, or I am looking at myself as a part of the subject? When we started this research, we were, we planned and we came up with questions, and these were questions that I even asked myself. Being like in my community, I never thought about it. I never thought about it like that. Like Delmer, he said he got stung or whatever, pricked by all these things. It just goes in there without thinking. I need to ask permission, and I feel like I was doing the same when we started this research. And for me, I can say, while I'm still paving my path through impactful research, based on what we have done so far with our research with Ms. Aisha and the interviews that I have conducted myself with my community members, I find it very important that we bring value out of what we are working on. And this value, we don't just leave it there, but we actually keep it within us, for the better of ourselves and our community. And while I was conducting interviews with my elders, there was a story where one of the elders shared with me, we had this unity that we had before that we don't have anymore. Where I come from in Belmopan, which is the city of Belmopan City, is the capital of Belize. And he was sharing to me, when they built houses, they had to come together. The community came together. The men and the women, the children came together. They all had different roles in building these homes that we call thatch houses, from leaves. The men would be up there, the women would be down making the meal, preparing the lunch, while the kids would be assisting, dragging these leaves. Everybody had some part to play. And I was thinking, I said, but we don't do it anymore in my community. And now that we have completed that part of research, I feel it is my role now to pass on this knowledge, pass on the results of our research, and come back to my community and give to them. Give to them what I learned. And being it that it's new in my community, I feel I have the obligation to share this, and I feel like I am the bearer of the results. Whatever happens here, I will take it back home and be like, this is what we got. This is what we need. What other problems do you have? My vice president, was sharing, what do we bring back to the community? Do they benefit? I am closer to the solution. So I am that bridge. Now it is my time, it is my turn to go back to them and bring to them what we need. I am a part of the solution. I may be a part of the problem. I am also part of the solution. And for me, that would be impactful research. It had impacted me, and now it is time for me to impact others as well. And it comes back right back to the relevance of this research, because I am giving them back what we needed. Something that I did not take into consideration, I am now taking it into consideration. I am now just learning, and that is what research does. We learn together, and we might not agree on all things, but at the end of the day, we find common grounds, and that common ground is what impacts all of us. I'm out with here.
Thank you, Dominga. Now I would like to invite Miss Abby Sarmiento to share.
Hi everyone. As you may know, my name is Abigail. I go by Abby mostly. I didn't really prepare much, but I mostly want to share my story of how I became connected again to my culture. So I grew up in a very conservative family, very religious. Originally, my heritage was seen as something bad, as something that they had demonized. But also, thanks to the impactful research I was part of the archaeology project. That's how I started learning more about my culture, both the present day Maya culture and what used to be happening in the past. I started connecting with indigenous group up in my hometown, Corozal, which is in north part of Belize. I started talking to them. I connected, and I saw how much it Isabel, if you could help me, me hacía falta.
You are lucky.
Yes, it was the lack of the connection to nature and my culture and everything had such an effect on me, and that's how I became very connected. And now I am in the process of reconnecting with my culture and learning more and more every day. I learn, and I think that is true impactful research, because in archaeology, most projects have the reputation of going in, doing an excavation, getting research from this sacred place, and not involving the community. This particular project that I was part of, and still I'm part of, we try to involve the indigenous community as much as we can. That was where I met them. That's where I learned about the different ceremonies, how you're supposed to ask permission, how we're supposed to be thankful to nature, and that is part of the what I think is impactful research, because they have one of the community and the researcher both benefit. And I think that is something that we are doing here today. the research we are conducting is benefiting both the communities and and us, right? And I think as we continue, it will benefit a lot of youths, I would say, like myself, to reconnect with their culture, be proud of their culture, and in the process preserve and basically maintain the traditions that we so need to preserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, raise it for Zayed.
We'll leave the youngest.
Yep. She turned 18 last week. Just in time to come here. Just without failing. Yeah, written document.
Well done.
Yeah, all that.
Like they mentioned, my name is Husaira. I am representing the University of Belize. And so just to shed light back onto to first start off, the prompt was, what does impact research mean and look like in your institution and our community context? So what I'll be bringing is the context based on my community. And again, I am of Mopan Mayan descent. I am one of the indigenous groups of Belize. So I would say focus would be on my community. And I come from a village called Maya Mopan Village, located in the southernmost part of Belize, which is the Stanford district. So firstly, impact researchers, again, research like time and time again, they've mentioned always they're publishing articles, they're measured in these citations. So coming from a Mayan community, I think impact research in my community context means research that does not just collect the data, again, like previously mentioned, but by actively improving the lives of these indigenous people in, again, Mopan Mayan indigenous communities, as well as the other indigenous communities. It is research that respects our traditions, our beliefs, our language, and our culture. So, again, oftentimes research is conducted within our communities. Data is gathered but never brought back to the people who gave that knowledge, who trusted the researchers that knowledge. And again, every time they say research, but they never get back from it. So that is something I would like to especially stress on. So I think impactful research in my community looks like a collaboration, and like Demba has especially mentioned, to accompany. It's more like companionship with data and land, and we again come to cultivate it in ways we can also give back to these communities. Again, these are Mopan Mayan people and all different other languages, especially like you guys, the Tzotzil in Mexico. And so we need to all collaborate. And for us, or you guys especially, again, with a lot of research background, would understand these data, these analysis, these numbers that you often look at publications, but they do not get that. So we have to make a connection to these communities to be able to understand and give back. So you can't, we share the publications to them. They may not understand the languages of those writings. So you need to make this connection, this companionship, to build a relationship in which they will understand these data and how to make sustainable results from them. So I believe it's working with local leaders, especially rooting back to our research with Ms. Aisha, Ms. Nalba, and Ms. Lama. So we were looking at, feeling, again, putting back to the first way, like Dominga had mentioned, we were all coming up with what do we stem this research from, and we were looking at belonging in communities that we stray away from. How do we connect back to her? Especially when our land that we are always connected is not with us. So I think impactful research is, again, working with local leaders, elders, and families to understand issues such as access to healthcare, education, and again, emphasis on land use. And again, with that, we delved into the health, how they have traditional healing methods that we would be looking into as well. So these would be examples such as studies on our traditional focus in medicine or farming practices are impactful when they help preserve indigenous knowledge while also preserving health outcomes or food security. And so impactful research in my context then, is the respect for indigenous Mayan communities. It is, again, ultimately, our community has long-lasting traditions that they've carried on for years and years, and these knowledges they built on through their traditions and through their experience. And so these are wisdoms that should not be replaced or ignored, but rather valued and integrated into, again, the Western way of thinking. And again, looking to that prompt again, it also focused on how do we assess these? How do we assess the quality, relevance, and value of high-impact research? So for me, I think to determine it in that sense of indigenous communities, it is by voicing the people that it affects. And this is sharing community knowledge and also cultural sensitivity. Rather not ignoring these traditions, but respecting these traditions, languages, and incorporating it with, again, research. And that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, our esteemed guests and panelists. This is incredible insights and wisdom. And now we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Justin to share the message.
Well, I can assure you I will say nothing that was nearly as profound as it was just said, to be honest. First, I just want to say thank you. I mean, I think we really received a gift here in terms of time, the wisdom, your experiences, your passion about your communities. We do live in this world of metrics and performance. I think a lot of the work that gets done at a university like this really centers around how do we organize and orchestrate our energy and our ethics and in our humanity around certain outcomes which move us up in a rankings or get us a little bit more exposure here or there. But at the heart of it all is this, right? It's people, and it's people connecting, relationships, everything you've spoken about. And how do we build those relationships in responsible ways? How do we do it in ways that sort of honor the human being and their story and their struggles and through those relationships, but ultimately to the point of impact that I think each of you spoke to. Also in ways that move us towards something that can create positive impact for our communities and on that community's terms. So I was deeply moved, actually, by everything you just said. I will, as I said, not be the most clever person on this, sitting on this side. So I'll start with one or two questions, and I do want to make sure that we have some time for the audience to ask questions, and I've got some more if we have time as well, but I do want to respect everyone's time. Each of you talked about the relationship between kind of land, knowledge, and people, and many other things that were far better than what I'm saying. But I think one of the challenges, certainly from a Western or a U.S. sort of mode of thinking about knowledge construction and production, is the idea that we're always moving towards something better, or smarter, or more rational, or more modern. And I don't know that that's always consistent with indigenous, and certainly I would assume with Mayan ways of thinking about the world. So if you don't mind, you can just kind of speak to how are we, and we're missing the mark, so I'll take that, and we can all be mad at me, but I think that Western sort of academies or institutions like this often miss the mark around how modern knowledge structures are inherently and always moving us forward. And I guess I'm asking, could you give us a sense of maybe where we're missing the mark, and that actually looking back at long-standing knowledge, indigenous ways of knowing and thinking and being in the world, and as it relates to land, is actually something we should be mindful of and learning from. Mm-hmm. And anyone could jump in, can happy that. It's always someone that couldn't.
Perhaps I can start sharing my point of view. There was another story that I wanted to tell. But I do want to perhaps add to that question or to respond to it through stating that when we look at some of these communities, I include myself in this. Sometimes because we are reading so much stuff being published academically, we think sometimes that we get in with these brand new ideas, and it's so revolutionary in what we're thinking, right? For example, the concept of decolonization. We think of it as, whoa, I'm coming in to decolonize these communities and the structures and so forth. Really, at the point of contact, decolonization was already starting. People were already resisting, and there were different ways that each of these communities were responding to these systems that were trying to structure their life. So to an extent, decolonization was there, that is organic. In a similar manner, I think we discussed earlier about this concept of sustainable living. I've engaged with numerous communities and also through numerous projects. And often I find myself saying, well, what can I come and tell them about sustainable living when really it's your way of life? And so sometimes that's where perhaps we should be mindful of trying to understand that perhaps it's not the same term, it's not the same way, but there is certainly something that is being done in that community that relates to what you or anybody is trying to do. And perhaps the second element that I think is important there is that research should be that specifically looking at how we create a balance between Western academia and all of these other forms of epistemologies that exist towards ensuring that there is more pluralism in epistemologies in academia particularly. Because if we produce whatever research and the dominant hierarchies remain, how does that equate to change? How does that impact the change for the community? And how does that impact the next generation? If the next generation continues growing and thinking that the only body of knowledge that matters is Western knowledge, then we are really still not there. And we could produce the best research, the best impact. But if that dominant idea is still there, we will still grow our children and they will still continue thinking that what matters is learning this over what they're living and to solve their own problems in their own communities.
Anyone else have thoughts? I would like to share some of my thoughts on that down.
And then projects it so
Yeah. So I'd like to share some of my thoughts on that. And I think it's about creating a balance. It's not to say that we're not living good, and it's not to say that we won't need any kind of development. One of the things I'd like to share when it comes to land is very important. It's a very important source of life for our indigenous Mayan communities. And without land, it's like becoming a slave in our communities. Because when you have land, you have food, you have water, and you have your shelter. A lot of times, we depend on all of these resources in order to have a good life. And there's a famous phrase that says, to be Maya is to be well. And what does that mean? When you have these resources, you're not dependent on anything else. You know that you have food, you have water, and you have the resources. And that means that we're rich in our own way. Yeah, so that is what we're in fact. A typical example would be when it comes to these what I mean by we need to create a balance. There's certain, I'll bring this up again, there's certain projects that go into the community and try to instill how should we live now. One of a good example would be the planting of corn or my traditional practices that has been working for generations is to do a traditional way of farming. But there's projects that go into the community where you need to be planting like this in order for you to get more, which is a great concept. But when it goes into the community, it's not that way. It doesn't work So when it goes into the communities now, it's like putting an additional burden to the communities. Now you need fertilizer now because there's certain way you need to be planting your corn. The idea is good from some research, some policy has created that which is good. But it affects the Maya way of living. Now that was an issue. So where the balance started to create now, there was a balance. It was noticed that this didn't work. So at some point, they went back again and tried how we can develop these things. So there was a plant, the Inga. Inga is a plant that regenerates the soil again. So what is happening now, there's an incorporation of Inga with the corn now because Inga creates that nutrients to the plant, to the soil, and then you can plant your corn in rows. So it over time, then you learn how to do this. So that's why I'm thinking that balance, there needs to be a balance, there needs to be a clear understanding of how it is going to benefit and how it will affect the client. So I think that's where I'm coming from, and there is a positive outcome now. Now the families don't need to depend on buying fertilizer because the Inga now regenerates the soil. Yeah. So that's where I'm coming with. There has to be some level of balance when it talks to that.
You want us? I can jump to the next question.
But just jumping in terms of past modernization, and the Western knowledge and culture itself. Both my colleagues mentioned that it has to be a balance. But I would like to share that if there's nothing wrong with modernization in any culture and in any group, if the knowledge and the modernization does not erase your identity, it does not make you feel at the end of the day or make your generation feel less, then from my experience as a researcher, that knowledge, that new knowledge, that modernization is welcome to the I've seen that in the Mennonite community that I goes in and do research. One of my passion is pesticide. And when we go in and try to introduce new pesticide to them, it depends on what their objective and their way. Within Belize, there are different Mennonite community, different levels. They are the traditional, they are the one that are exposed to technology, and they are the one that are commercialized. Yeah. And so it depends on the community that I'm going into, and it depends on what it is. If it's a community that is not interested in commercialization, then they're not interested in the introduction of pesticide in their way of life and in their farming. And so you have to come up with new ways of introducing control mechanism that they can use for their product. But when we go into community that welcome pesticide, you have to make sure that one of the things that I look at is debt, the cost of debt, how many debts over the years that these pesticides have cost because of wrongly use. And so some of them are welcome, but like I said, you have experience where knowledge, modernization is welcome if the practice, if what you're bringing doesn't conflict with their identity or their way of life. And so as a researcher, you have to be cognizant of that, right? And so that's how I want to add that to what my three colleagues. It's more than balance. Balance is really good, but if you're not enrolling the future, you're not eroding the identity, my generation will not feel less. My kids will proudly say, I am a Garifuna, I am a Maya, and they live with that. And if that can be maintained, then the modernization, the new technology, the new resources is welcome. Because remember, in a community, tradition evolves. Even though we say, well, I have this tradition, this cultural tradition from my generation, from my ancestors, from me, come all the way from St. Vincent, where my ancestors come from. But one thing we have to realize, tradition evolve? And so as we're evolving in our tradition, are we erasing our identity? And if the answer is no, then modernization is always welcome. New knowledge is always welcome. And that new knowledge become our new tradition and our new way of life. Right? So that's how I look at it. That's how I look at Western knowledge and modernization as it evolves. As a researcher, when I go into the field.
My next question, and I guess before I give my next question, I do want to say I think the 3 students who presented are going to change the world. I mean, and so the question is for Rosaria, Domingo, or Abby, and it actually resonates with the point that was just made, which is how can we do intergenerationally responsible research? Because I think you've really eloquently, and the folks in this room kind of are sensitive to this, eloquently spoken to how researchers need to be responsible when they go in certain communities, right? And that there are traditions and cultures being passed down and need to be preserved in language and things like that. But I would guess there might be a paradox or a little tension there in that in many indigenous communities, the younger generations might be seeking, maybe it's employment in a bigger city, or maybe it's they're subjected to an education system that's trying to eradicate the indigenous language, or many different pressures for younger people in these communities. So in what ways could researchers, as they're collaborating with local community members and researchers throughout the Belize, kind of do that responsibly, interact with the younger generations of these communities in ways that, again, don't bring in some of these same tensions that are sort of pervading throughout many parts of the world?
That's a really excellent question, honestly, because I found myself asking myself that same question when I did my interviews. Again, I go back to what I mentioned earlier, that I felt like I was the middleman between my elders that I interviewed and people younger than me. And I felt like it was my obligation to try to find common ground between both. And I'll give an example of when I had to basically translate MSU's consent form. I was in the consent form and they were like, you need to get them to understand and sign, and I was like, how do I translate all of this into my language, or how do I tell them what this is saying in a way that they will understand? Because what I can say is that when they see paper like that, they will be like, oh no, if you read certain things to them, I'm like, no, I don't want to be a part of it. So they don't understand exactly what it's saying if I translate it directly. So I had to find words that meant what the entire consent form was saying without taking it out of context, adding more things to it than it needed. And I feel like, again, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like I am a part of that community that is researching and is being researched. So I'm right at that, yes, where I am. So I feel like it is my responsibility now to bring new knowledge and try to give that to them in a way that they understand, in a way that they can accept, will accept, without like what my vice president was sharing, where she said that we're not taking away from what they are already doing. We're adding to how it can also benefit them. We're adding to what they already know, to what they have already. And I feel like that's how we work together. I feel like that's how I was working with them, how I want to go ahead and work, because they're not readily accepting to what I'm doing or to what I want to do. And what is also important is, we're talking about, almost like preservation of culture and using knowledge, new knowledge. Again, where I come from, I can remember as a child, we used to have our traditional deer dance very so often. And to a point where we didn't have it for 15 years. I believe it was 15 or 16 years until like 2 years ago, they started it again. And I looked at it and I said, that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to bring it back to life, to make it alive again. But I feel like there were also like, oh, that's not how you do it. But to me, it's important. We're bringing back a part of our culture that we didn't have for so long, with a twist of what of modernization or with new technology. And I feel like we young people, yes, we're keeping it alive, but we're also bringing this new technology and into it. So it's accepting both to the elders and to the young people, and I'm sure those younger than myself will also be accepting, and I would hope that they would keep it alive. And I would want to relate it to research, where it's the same. It's the same for research. Yes, there might not have been any research back then, but now for myself and for those younger than me, that they continue with the same path of taking both their generation and older generation into consideration.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean,
On my end, you spoke about how to incorporate, modernized research methods in the new generation responsibly with these the younger generations behind homes. Evidently, these new kids, those are using their modern language. So most of them are getting used to English. So how do you interest these new generation? Because again, I think everything has been modernized again. Even if like me and Dominga, even if though we have ambition to bring back the culture, how do we interest these younger generations whose minds are stuck on the phones and playing games in English, right? So for me, how I looked at it was, you also have to find new methods and how to interest them in accepting their traditions, and again, to be not to change their identity, but to add on to it. So we were doing a tour, and we had went to the sandbox, the technology. We're looking at those. So what sparked something in me is that these are new technology. Again, the world is evolving. It is important that these younger generations are also mentally prepared for the outside world, as again, AI is something huge that is rapidly growing, and a lot of interest in those ones. So I especially took inspiration from the virtual reality, since I had to try one of those ones. So if you look at these kids, if you tell them, oh, let's go dance marimba, they would be like, I'm playing a game. Let me do my game. And so again, kids would always go to these games. So what you need to do is, how do you bring technology and tradition and to interest these new children? So I was looking at the VR as an example. It's cool. They're like, oh, it's a game. I want to play it. And so an example of how to incorporate tradition for them to be interested and to, again, bring back their identity and connect them to their traditions is, for example, a lot of examples, again, like she mentioned the their dance, building traditional houses. And again, an example be us incorporating VR, making, or traditional foods as well, making a software that, again, firstly though, it is a very long process, so it still need data to extract, so you can preserve these traditional forms. And then once you have these data, again, you'll have to, like I was saying earlier, you have to, these results have to be accessible back to these communities. So we have to share findings in ways that we would understand, these communities would understand. And again, with technology, a software is developed based on traditional methods of, let's say, making the traditional foods, and these, let's say, cleaning the farms with these milk farms in traditional ways of planting in the indigenous ways in their knowledge and wisdom, and making it in a software, and that could then be incorporated into these new technologies such as VR, where kids will definitely be interested in using. And then, again, they're playing games, but while playing games, they're also learning their traditions by being involved in these software, which is, again, incorporated using again Western ways, but also keeping them linked to their church. Love that's so church. Thank you.
Sorry, I will maybe open it up because I don't have a little bit of time for the questions from the audience.
Hi, nice to see you all again. So I study nutrition and foods. I met you all. I just happened to be in our Cuban nutrition and translational physiology laboratory when that's the name of it when they walked in. But I'm really interested in like your traditional foods and medicinal plants. And as I mentioned, about 20 years ago, now I went to Belize to study the exact same thing, like my healers. So it's like fate. You know, that's how I feel. It's super cool. But one thing I think about it, I was just doing a little search online to see what's been done in the area of, you know, food phytochemicals and natural medicines in Belize. And when I was there, I learned a lot about, you know, the plants and how they look and the traditional knowledge, right? And I was just curious, you know, thinking and reflecting on like getting back to the community. Let's say I were to, you know, come and form a partnership related to some of that medicinal plants and the foods. What if some of that were to ever conflict with traditional Mayan knowledge, let's say of the health properties or benefits of a certain food? Like, how would you sort of think about that in terms of truly being able to get back to the community while still valuing and respecting the traditional knowledge? Because what I want to say is, you know, the traditional ways are probably the ways that we're all trying to get back to, you know, in research and foods. That means, you know, I just feel like a lot of the things that we think are the way to do it, it turns out they're not the way to do it, and shaking us. You know, so I'm just reflecting on that. I'm not really asking a straight question. I'm just talking at this point, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about is like, how could research like that be pursued in a way that would elevate, you know, the traditional ways of thinking and the practices and promote, I don't know, an elevation in medicinal food properties and, you know, I'm trying to say in a way that would be respectful and responsible.
I don't have an answer. But there have been there's this concept of embodied well-being, traditional embodied knowledge, which I cannot recall the name, but it's Baines who's been working on that in our Maya community. So perhaps looking at what form of research and the process of research, through her research, you could probably come up with or understand at least one avenue of how that work has been being done in Belize, in the communities. I believe that's in the Maya Mupan communities. And then you also have another scholar by the name of James Waldron, who looks at same thing, well-being, health, traditional ecological knowledge and plants in the Kekchi communities. So perhaps looking at those two scholars and seeing here what processes they have followed and how they have come across in those projects could help in informing how that would look.
I think, you know, thinking about like your comment related to mute, and I'll stop so I can get that way. But, you know, if there's a way almost to build up some of the traditional Mayan plants that are rich in phytochemicals that absolutely have medicinal properties, right? And almost bring that back into the traditional culture with some of these research studies, then could it potentially lead to increased incorporation of it into medical education and nurse education? You know, to try to say like that actually be beneficial.
Perhaps I can contribute to that as well. I think it's a great idea. There's a lot of potential, but the first thing is proper communication, the work they needed, and it's probably for us to be something that we be clarified as well. And I think that with that, the subject, as long as it's for the well-being, it does necessarily means to incur any other thing that will affect them. It is going to be such a beautiful thing to do, because at the end of the day, it's going to benefit the health of its communities. So I think that it is a great idea. So get back to the communities, but The only thing is we need to be mindful of who or how are we going to make volume. That is the most important.
And that's part of you all.
Yes, most definitely. It is something that perhaps we can look forward to see how we can implement that. And I know that the communities, as long as it's something that is supposed to benefit communities, everybody will be happy at 40.
I think we have time for one more question, which Dr. Thompson wanted. One more question, and then we'll wrap things up.
Just very quickly, to respond to the virtual reality and cultural implications, there is a system that's been created by a colleague at Carnegie Mellon called the Afro Metaverse, which is doing just this with virtual reality and uplifting Black youth globally in a virtual reality setting to talk about, cultures and languages and these types of things. I could connect this via the lake after that. We'll do it more. But my question, when we're talking about all these different issues, and also I think this is the best session I have attended since I've been at FSU, so thank you all so much for teaching me so much while coming. My question was about language revitalization. So as an applied linguist, my concept is that you can't understand a culture without understanding the language. Or it's very difficult to. It might be impossible, but that's extreme, I guess. So in the high school, we talked a little bit yesterday, you talk about bringing the students connecting more with nature, but also a big portion of that is language revitalization. So I'm curious about how you get the students interested in their languages that they may not have grown up with, or there may have been some different shame wrapped around with speaking the language out, like you discussed also previously. But how do you do that? What is the mechanism, and what are some strategies to think about, or just kind of how does it look? Like, how does that learning experience look for the students at your high school?
Like in my high school, I think everyone expects that they need to learn the language. With the support teachers and with the support of the communities, we have been able to gain that interest for our students. Not much for our Maya students, but particular for our non-Maya students.
Okay.
So it's also important to know that we have some Maya students and non-Maya students. But what actually brought the interest is it's the coming together and socializing a lot with each other. And the more they become socialized, the more they're understanding the language. And when they start to get that interest, now our role is our teachers start to show them how to write it properly, with the correct spellings, and to read it. That's when we capture their attention there. So it starts from the students, the rest of the other students. They know how to speak the language as well. The Maya students know how to speak the language, but their issue is to write. Writing is an issue. And I think that's something that we need to actually, for me, also for the institution as well. It is something that we need to see how we can input it. Our objective is to try to get this into the other primary schools. But there's little to no assistance. So most of the materials that we depend on are from a very established organization in Guatemala. So Belize doesn't have. It's very limited when it comes to language revitalization. It's very limited in Belize. Yeah. So at some point we would depend a lot on the resources from the academy in Guatemala. So that's how we get that interest towards students.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Can I just add?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because in Belize, we have English as the official language, and the language policy states that. And so while we have 6 or 7 different languages, with Belize Creole being the lingua franca, language of everyday conversation, there is not that political will to have the indigenous languages, which would be the Mayan languages, along with the original language. Spanish is taught as a subject. And it's, you could take 8 years of Spanish and you will still not be able to speak Spanish and might be able to conjugate very well. That helps you.
We're unfamiliar with this.
Unfortunately, it's not within the language planning, the language policy. It's not there. But we hope one day to, and they are very optimistic about it.
I'm sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, bringing back to what he was saying, listening to what he was saying, I think what I understood, how he interests these children, and again, you have to also look at psychology. So when you bring these indigenous students together, they, more than often, if everyone speaks, or majority of them speak the language, you communicate using that language, especially during breaks, or again, because you're able to, express yourself more in your language compared to English. You might still be speaking English in some ways, but to express certain feelings, you will switch to your mother tongue. And so with that all being able, or majority being able to speak the language, again, I think psychology also plays a role in interesting the non-mind speakers to learn the language because they want to feel involved. So bringing them into this union, they want to be involved and they want to fit in. So that, again, is like twisting psychology for them to learn the language.
Well, I just wanted to add that at the Institute, the work that we're doing right now to understand the state of indigenous languages is in collaboration with the ministry. So we are talking about developing a comprehensive language policy that would specifically, because the policy that is enforced currently, partly we have in the Constitution that English is a language, and we also have the policy that makes the most damage is the one that is in the education system, which says specifically that English is what is supposed to be learned, and secondly, that you use whatever language, Spanish, Creole, to teach English, not to reinforce that language. So what you're seeing across Belize is that more and more parents are choosing to teach English as early as possible because you are seeing, in other words, competency and quote-unquote smartness is also equated to being able to speak English. So at the moment, what we're doing is that we have created a task force in Belize looking specifically at this issue of languages and the decline of indigenous languages. We are trying to understand comprehensively the context and use that specific data to see how we advocate with data for a comprehensive language policy that would go beyond education and other spaces as well. So in other words, everybody likes to talk about language as heritage, but language is also a right. And we should be moving towards safeguarding that right for many indigenous communities across Belize and other communities across Belize. So
just as a real quick wrap up, I remember it was about 2 years ago. I stood there, just about 40 feet from that, there at the research showcase, and it was at a time of political kind of similar as the one now. And I think I said something like, universities aren't really worth the bricks they're built with if you can't bring people together from all over the world to share ideas and move society forward in kind of ethically and just ways. And I think we're taking a big step in that regard today at this place with Kulapin to have done. Charlene actually said better, which is that this is what universities are for, and think it's for. So I just want to ask you to join me in thanking our family. To sign an MOU between Ames College, FSU, and thanks for being with you. And so we do have a partnership we're building that will sustain over time, and so hopefully this will not be the last time we have.
Thank you.